Chapter 613, Vermouth Lionheart 5. Bonus image. Vermouth felt the chain binding his soul tighten. Eventually he came to understand. His body, which was born as the avatar of destruction, would perish alongside the demon king of destruction. But Vermouth Lionheart would not perish. His soul was no longer an avatar of destruction. Originally, his body and soul should have disintegrated along with destruction, but the contract had bound his soul with chains. From the beginning, Vermouth barely managed to say through his trembling lips. Was this what you aimed for from the start? No, Eugene answered honestly. Initially I had no specific plan. I just didn't want you to die, and I thought perhaps a desperate wish might find a way. He had not arranged for this to happen from the start. Eugene hadn't fully understood Vermouth's situation, nor had he any guess how the battle might unfold. In the end, that desperate wish created a way. I wished it, you wished it, and everyone wished it, Eugene said. He turned his head to look at the distant horizon. By everyone he was referring to all those who had stood against the demon king of destruction. They had not forgotten the name Vermouth Lionheart. They had always seen him as the hero. Vermouth wore a stunned expression as Eugene explained. He couldn't help but burst into laughter. A miracle, you say, he murmured. A miracle indeed. Vermouth repeated the word while bowing his head. For Vermouth, a miracle had always been a double-edged sword. It could be said that a miracle had brought him into existence, but repeated failures and 300 years of solitude had made him resentful of the word miracle. Therefore, Vermouth couldn't see a miracle as hope or salvation. No matter how much he wished, he himself could not bring about a miracle. The demon king of incarceration, Vermouth called out. He raised his head. The demon king of incarceration was standing close, gazing at him. Now, what happens to me? Do I live as one of your minions? Vermouth asked. It was natural for him to be curious. Vermouth well understood what it meant to make a pact with a demon king and surrender the soul. His soul could be preserved until the demon king chose to release it, or depending on the demon king's power he could be reborn as a vessel. The soul bound to the demon king would have no freedom. No, the demon king of incarceration said with a shake of his head. Vermouth Lionheart, I will not make you one of my vassals. There is no need for that. Then what? Vermouth asked. You should know, the demon king of incarceration answered with a faint smile. He raised his head and gazed at the crumbling void of the sky before continuing. You've always known what I wanted. Don't you, Vermouth? Vermouth just kept looking at the demon king without responding. Today, the demon king of incarceration began. However, he couldn't finish his sentence. He had been worn down by immeasurable despair over eternity. He felt overwhelmed by the rush of emotions. He had longed for it so deeply, and yet he had believed it would never truly be accomplished. Thus, the demon king of incarceration paused and closed his eyes in silence. Finally, after getting his emotions under control, he declared, Today, in this world, both the demon king of destruction and the demon king of incarceration will die. He had lived expecting the death of the demon king of destruction. In anticipation he had continued the world over and over. He could never defeat the demon king of destruction himself. So he became a greater demon king to test the world before the impending doom. There is no longer a reason to start a new era. I have no reason to do so, the demon king of incarceration whispered under his breath. He chuckled and lowered his head, whispering as he met Vermouth's gaze. I have longed for death my whole life. No. I can finally die. Vermouth, you have nothing to worry about. I will not make your soul one of my vassals, nor do I plan to live on and command you. Vermouth wasn't sure what the demon king was hinting at. Today I will die, and your soul, with which I've made a pact, will dwell in my body, incarceration declared. Vermouth's eyes widened at the response. That's all. Vermouth, it does not mean I am leaving you the throne of the demon king. My body will be devoid of any dark power. It will merely serve as a vessel for your soul, said the demon king of incarceration before slowly taking a seat. My body may not please you as a vessel, but you know as well as I do that this is unavoidable and the best we can do. Even if he was no longer an avatar of destruction, Vermouth's soul was exceptional. Most human bodies would not suffice as his vessel. Then should a new vessel be specifically fashioned for Vermouth? There was a precedent. Amelia Merwin had created Hamel's Death Knight. She had crafted a new body that suited him well after she lost his original corpse. But there was a difference in the size of the souls. No matter how special the prepared vessel was, it could not be tailored to Vermouth's soul. The only feasible option might be to use the body of a lion heart, but Vermouth himself would never consider stealing another human's body. Then what about simply facing death and reincarnating later? That wasn't even an option worth discussing. What everyone desired was to return together. Is that enough? Incarceration asked. After a moment of silence, Vermouth asked with a resigned smile, Demon King of Incarceration. I know how much you have anticipated this moment, but can you truly die satisfied? He knew it was inevitable. He wasn't in a position to refuse. Yet, Vermouth felt compelled to ask this to the Demon King of Incarceration. Do you think I have any regrets? The Demon King of Incarceration scoffed in response. To me, life has been a dreadful burden. I have no intention of enjoying a new life now that I'm unburdened. Perhaps no, certainly the world will change. But do I really need to see such a world? The Demon King of Incarceration chuckled as he looked at Eugene. You have different convictions from mine. You chose a different future and realized it by defeating me and killing the Demon King of Destruction. Thus, all of this should be enjoyed by you, the victors, and I, the loser, should. Incarceration paused. With a clank, the chain connecting to Vermouth pulled towards the Demon King of Incarceration as he finished. Die here. Vermouth no longer questioned the intentions of the Demon King of Incarceration. He was the original hero who became the greater Demon King for the world, and he was satisfied and sought rest. His words and will were without deceit. The Demon King of Incarceration's response contained no lie. Understood, Vermouth said with a nod and gripped the chain. Demon King of Incarceration. I will forsake that name and inhabit your body. I will live on as Vermouth Lionheart. There was no hesitation in his response. The Demon King of Incarceration smiled faintly when he saw Vermouth's bright golden eyes. He did not compare it to the face he knew from a distant, very distant past. The man whom the Demon King of Incarceration once cherished as a friend had died due to a coincidental disaster. The person before him now was Vermouth Lionheart, who had saved the world 300 years ago and today had defeated the Demon King of Destruction alongside his comrades. Vermouth, the Demon King of Incarceration, smiled as he spoke. I wish you the life you desire. Vermouth laughed. He had never imagined he would receive good wishes from the Demon King of Incarceration. He wanted to respond, but he couldn't because his body had completely disintegrated along with destruction. Eugene Lionheart, the Demon King of Incarceration, called. Still smiling, he turned his gaze towards Eugene. He continued while guiding Vermouth's soul into the vessel of his body through the chain. Thank you for killing the Demon King of Destruction. Eugene remained silent as he gazed at the Demon King of Incarceration. He did not entertain the thought that the Demon King of Incarceration would engage in folly here. There was no reason for the Demon King of Incarceration to betray him now. If any vestige of reluctance caused him to cling to life at the very end, it would be an insult to the eternal life and beliefs the Demon King of Incarceration had pursued. Therefore, the Demon King of Incarceration would never engage in such an act. Eugene was certain of it. Thank you for allowing me to die, the Demon King spoke with a satisfied smile. His answer was free of any lingering attachments or obsessions. Rest, Eugene said. Then with a smirk he added, no. Go to hell. The greater Demon King had lived through eternity hoping to save the world. He had despaired in his failures and repeated the cycle of rebirthing the world. He had witnessed the deaths of countless truly numerous lives. Although he couldn't compare to the Demon King of Destruction, the Demon King of Incarceration had also slain many, enough to fill the world. So Eugene did not wish for him to rest. The only place for a Demon King to lie was in hell. I hope so, the Demon King of Incarceration responded with a chuckle. Rumble. Silence followed his response. The Demon King of Incarceration bowed his head. He seemed devoid of any life. Eugene sat and waited quietly with Molan, the saints, and Sienna nearby. Destruction was crumbling. Soon this place would vanish completely and Eugene and his companions would exit. If I'm standing alone, I really won't look the part, Eugene grumbled as he glanced at his legs. Fortunately, thanks to the Demon King of Destruction's death, his leg had regenerated. The sight of their emergence would become a legend and a myth. It would be long recounted in tales for generations to come. But if he were to be standing awkwardly on one leg as he emerged, future statues of him might also depict him as one-legged. 1,000 years from now, he might be known as the one-legged Eugene instead of the radiant Eugene or the stupid Hamel. Hey, wake up. Eugene slapped Molin's cheek repeatedly. It might be a decent sight for him to be supporting 3 unconscious people and standing unscathed. No, he didn't like that idea. He was being childish and stubborn, but Eugene sincerely thought so. Ugh. After a few more slaps, Molin groaned aloud. Eugene laughed brightly as he forcibly sat him up, then started slapping Sienna's cheek. Oh, that hurts. After about 10 slaps, Sienna also came to her senses. Everyone was quick to regain consciousness, thanks to the Demon King of Destruction's dark power having dissipated with his destruction. Eugene had Sienna sit up as she blinked dazedly and raised his hand toward Christina's cheeks. I'm already awake. This time there was no need for a slap. Christina quickly opened her eyes and blocked Eugene's hand. La Lady Anise is also within me. So, Sir Eugene, there's no need to slap my cheek, she continued. My jaw hurts, Molin muttered as he adjusted his creaking jaw. Vermouth. Sienna suddenly screamed, sporting her swollen cheeks. Where's Vermouth? Isn't there something else you should be asking? Like what happened to the Demon King of Destruction, responded Eugene. Seeing you acting like this, you must have taken care of it just fine. So where is Vermouth? Sienna asked. Are you more worried about Vermouth even after I fought so hard to defeat destruction? Eugene asked glumly. Anyone would think you fought alone from the way you talk, Sienna said, shaking her head in disbelief. Hey, fighting were all there was, we would have done it long ago. Why did we go through so much trouble? It was to save Vermouth. You wanted to save Vermouth. So what's wrong with me asking where Vermouth is? It gets on my nerves that you're asking about Vermouth rather than how I'm doing even though I'm right in front of you, Eugene grumbled before turning his head and spitting. Because you're standing right in front of me all in one piece. No, don't tell me you're. Sienna's lips twitched upwards in amusement. Are you really jealous? Friends don't get jealous of each other, responded Eugene. Seems to me like you are jealous, commented Sienna. Why the foo, CK would I be jealous? Do you like Vermouth that much? Asked Eugene. As a friend, yes, answered Sienna. You like him? As in really like him? This damn. Eugene grumbled. Hey, so you hate him as a friend? You hate Vermouth. Sienna retorted. I hate him, I absolutely despise the bastard. Once we get out of here I'm really going to catch him and beat the shit out of him. Eugene abruptly stopped talking and turned away. He could sense breaths of air coming from the Demon King of Incarceration. Eugene wasn't the only one who felt it. Why is the Demon King of Incarceration sitting here in front of us like this? Anise asked. Is he pretending to be our friend now because he doesn't want to die? Sienna chimed in. Swish. The hair of the Demon King of Incarceration began to change color in front of everyone. His black hair shifted to ash gray, causing Sienna and Anise to gasp and step back. Vermouth. Molin stuttered out the name. Crack. The body of the Demon King of Incarceration transformed to fit the soul that had newly inhabited it. Vermouth lifted his head and blinked a few times before looking down at his hands. Ha ha ha. He couldn't help but laugh. The voice was unmistakably that of Vermouth, known to all. Vermouth. Molin embraced Vermouth with a broad grin. How much did you hear? Eugene asked with slightly narrowed eyes. Though he was happy he had to have his priorities straight. From the beginning, Vermouth answered. Well, I didn't say anything I shouldn't have, retorted Eugene. How badly do you want to beat me up? Vermouth asked with a laugh, and Eugene responded not with words but by casually flipping him the middle finger. What the hell happened? Sienna asked in wonder. Why has Sir Vermouth become the Demon King of Incarceration? Or rather, has the Demon King of Incarceration become Sir Vermouth? Anise asked, sounding confused. The two weren't able to get a grasp on the situation. But instead of answering, Eugene pushed himself up from the ground. We'll talk later. First stand up, he ordered. Why? Sienna questioned. If we go out there looking slumped, it'll look pathetic, Eugene answered. Is that really what's important? Anise asked. Of course it's important, Eugene said without hesitation. He firmly urged Sienna and Anise to their feet. Anise, hand over that body to Christina first. Then stand behind her as an angel, Eugene commanded. Excuse me, Anise said, startled. Don't tell me you plan to hide inside Christina even at this last moment? Eugene remarked. But, what's wrong with that? I don't particularly want to become known to the world. Anise replied. I don't like it. I don't like it either. Eugene and Christina responded simultaneously. You've suffered just as we have. Shouldn't the world know about it? Eugene asked. I couldn't have done anything by myself. I could only be here today because of you, sister, Christina chimed in. But. Anise hesitated to agree. The reason was simple. She had done many things that might be considered disgraceful while inhabiting Christina's body, and if it became known that she had been inhabiting Christina's body as an angel, wouldn't that tarnish the name the faithful Anise that had been revered for 300 years? Hurry up before I have to drag you out. Eugene shouted. Why are you rushing me like this? Anise asked, distressed. It's all come crumbling down already. Eugene pointed to the gaping ceiling and screamed. It was true, they didn't have much time. The space around them was crumbling after the death of the Demon King of Destruction, and the outside scenery was starting to blur into view. At first glance, it seemed like all the Nur had vanished and everyone was awaiting the return of the heroes right outside. Technology now is much better than in our time. The images of us emerging from this space will be magically extracted and revealed to the world. They'll become photographs, whether in newspapers or broadcasts, Eugene said. Why are you bringing up your ambitions right now? Hey, do you think I'm doing this just for myself? It's for all of us. To show that we've returned. Together. Eugene responded. To think he would speak so openly. Anise's face burned with embarrassment. You should have said that earlier. She said. Oh, Sir Eugene, how beautiful is your heart. Christina exclaimed. Anise could not help but sympathize with Christina's joy. She genuinely found Hamel to be charming and adorable. After transferring control of the body to Christina, Anise took on her angelic form and flew behind Christina. Ahem. Sienna cleared her throat and discreetly moved closer to Eugene. Christina was about to stand on the opposite side of Eugene. She suddenly burst into a short laugh and instead stood beside Sienna. Sir Vermouth, Anise called out Vermouth's name with a bright smile. Please stand beside Hamel. Why next to me? Eugene questioned. We've put so much effort into rescuing Sir Vermouth, so shouldn't we display it to everyone? That we've defeated the Demon King of Destruction, saved the world and even rescued Sir Vermouth, Anise replied. That makes sense, Eugene acknowledged. Eugene helped Vermouth to his feet. Should I hold the axe? Molen asked with a serious expression while taking his place next to Vermouth. I don't have an axe right now. Why do you need an axe? It's not like you're going to kill anyone, responded Eugene. Then Hamel, why are you holding your divine sword if you're not planning to kill anyone either? Retorted Molen. I'm in the center. I should at least hold my sword high, responded Eugene. Hamel, I haven't seen it directly, but I've seen the statue you left in Shimuan in a photograph, Molen said suddenly. And, asked Eugene. Honestly, I thought it looked really tacky, Molen responded. A sound escaped between Eugene's teeth. And you think the statue you left in the capital city isn't tacky? Why the fuck did you put me in there? Eugene asked through gritted teeth. I even named the capital after you to honor your sacrifice, said Molen. Your statues in Ruhr. The ones with the axe raised. Those are damn tacky too. Eugene shouted. It's all the same. Can you all just quiet down? Sienna interrupted their banter. You think you're the exception, huh? Hey, Sienna, I'm talking about that green square. You're there holding a staff too. Eugene shouted. I never posed for that. Why are you giving me crap for something they made up on their own? Sienna retorted. Enough, Christina interjected, unable to listen to the childish quarrel any longer. She smiled refreshingly while gazing at the increasingly distinct scenery outside. Why don't we all just put our arms around each other's shoulders? Around the shoulders? Eugene asked. Yes. Haven't we all returned together just as we wished? Christina said. Christina gave a demonstration. She draped her arm over Sienna's shoulder and gently brushed across Eugene's lower back. Eugene felt a shiver run through him as he tentatively raised his hand to grasp Sienna's shoulder. "We need to get a bit closer," Anise chimed in. She subtly leaned forward and stood behind Sienna. She placed her hands on Eugene and Christina's shoulders. Suddenly, Sienna found herself tightly sandwiched in the middle, unable to move. Vermouth debated whether to drape his hand over Eugene's neck or just lightly touch his left shoulder. He suddenly made eye contact with Christina as he glanced over Eugene's shoulder. "Is that so?" Vermouth murmured. He nodded calmly with a serene expression. He understood perfectly what Christina indicated and quietly placed his hand just on Eugene's shoulder. Mullen did the same. "Perfect," Christina nodded. "Is it really perfect?" Only Sienna, sandwiched between Eugene and Christina with Anise at her back, felt doubtful. "This is a disaster." A roar of cheers erupted as they emerged outside. Under the scrutiny of countless eyes, Eugene thought, if this moment is captured in a photograph, the title would be, "The Most Awkward Hero and His Companions in the World." 1. Not sure where he found something to sit on. Open Bookworm and Danthman's Thoughts. Chapter 6:14. Vermouth Lionheart 6. The Nur had been pouring forth without an end, but suddenly, they all froze in place before beginning to disappear in unison. It didn't take long for all the Nur to vanish without a trace, despite having filled the plains and the snowy mountains with heaps of corpses. Those who had desperately held the front lines facing death, and those who had supported them from behind to prevent the lines from being pushed back, all who had dominated the skies, the land and the snowy fields, needed a moment to grasp the reason behind the sudden disappearance of the Nur. "Is it over?" someone muttered belatedly. Similar murmurs emerged from various parts of the battlefield. Soon, these murmurs turned into a great shout and all the survivors cheered in delight. It was over. It was truly over. The army of the Demon King of Destruction, which had emerged as if to bring about the end of the world, had completely disappeared. As they cheered, everyone looked toward the Demon King of Destruction. The figure of the Demon King of Destruction no longer seemed grotesque or ominous. The dizzying colors had faded, and the dark power that had instilled fear in their hearts was no longer perceptible. Carmen was gasping and huffing laboriously and barely clung to consciousness. Her heart felt as though it might burst and her breathing would not settle. Heaven Genocide, which could be called Carmen's trademark, had long since been shattered. The armor that had earned her the epithet of the Dragon Lion was the same. With her weapon in such a state, her bare hands fared no better. She could no longer even clench her blood-soaked hands. They hung limply at her sides as she looked at the Demon King of Destruction. Vague figures appeared in the fading colors. 5. No 6? Carmen strained her eyes to discern the figures but to no avail. "Why are there 6 of them?" Gilead asked while barely holding onto a broken sword. Alchester lifted his head to look ahead, even as blood kept dripping from his mouth. "The Demon King of Incarceration was in there, wasn't he?" he said. 4 heroes had gone in to kill the Demon King of Destruction: Eugene Lionheart, Sienna Meridian, Mullen Roar and Christina Rogerus. If they had succeeded in their mission to rescue the Great Vermouth as hoped, there should have been 5. Counting the Demon King of Incarceration, then perhaps 6. Though the Demon King of Incarceration could hardly be called a hero. Still, he had sacrificed himself a week ago to temporarily seal the Demon King of Destruction. Guillaume attempted to count the numbers in his head but suddenly felt dizzy and collapsed to the ground. His mental state was so poor that he couldn't even count simple numbers correctly. "It must have ended, right?" Guillaume asked with desperate hope. It was a sentiment shared by everyone. Why is the Demon King of Incarceration standing so close to them? Lovelian expressed his doubt after descending from the sky. It was a valid question. The veil of colors was still fading, and the figures of the heroes were still not clearly visible beyond it. Yet even if they were just wavering shadows, it was evident how they were standing together. Arms around each other's shoulders? Ivatar muttered under his breath. He had already collapsed a while ago. Arms around each other's shoulders? Raphael leaped down from Apollo upon hearing those words. God has subdued the Demon King. Raphael could not help but shout. He was feeling overwhelmed by surging faith. Subdued? Everyone squinted and stared at the shadows after hearing Raphael's sudden exclamation. It was a hard thing to believe unless one of them was kneeling. But none of the 6 visible shadows appeared to be on their knees. Perhaps Raphael's pain and fatigue had clouded his judgment. That wing must belong to Saint Christina, and that large figure must be Lord Molan. But who is the other one? Those unaware of Anis's existence began speculating amongst themselves. Perhaps they become friends with the demon king of incarceration inside? Melkith suggested. Stop talking nonsense. Herodes, the Blue Tower master, quickly reproached her. What's so nonsensical about it? After fighting like this, camaraderie could sprout. Melkith scoffed in response while lying sprawled on the ground. I see it now. There was no longer any need for guesswork as the figures became clearer. Clap, 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 Carmen uttered without a hint of embarrassment. She had opened her mouth to mimic the sound of clapping when she realized she could not produce a loud enough clap with her tattered hands. Right beside her, Gilead stared at her while she demonstrated her unique ability to produce a sound with mouth claps but could not think of it as strange behavior. Instead, Gilead was deeply touched and overwhelmed and called out, Lady Carmen. He wanted to cry. It would be none other than Carmen who must be feeling the most sorrow at the moment. She would have wanted to applaud loudly enough to shake the world, but she couldn't. Thus, Gilead raised his arms high for all to see in her stead. Clap, clap, clap. He spread his arms wide and thundered applause across the battlefield. Soon after, Guion, Guilford and all the Lionhearts began clapping. The applause began with them but quickly spread across the entire battlefield. Everyone approached the vanishing form of the Demon King of Destruction while clapping and cheering. Uaea. The names echoed in the cheers were not unified. Some shouted for Eugene Lionheart, others for Sienna Meridian, some for Molan Roar, and still some others for Christina Rogerus. Among the names shouted was also that of Vermouth Lionheart. Amid the applause and cheers, the heroes' forms became visible. Clap, 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 clap. The applause and cheers gradually died down. They had to. The sight of the emerging heroes was truly shocking. Even a child would look at the heroes now and wonder, why are they like that? Wow. Clap, clap, clap. But no one could ask about it. The overwhelming emotion of awe far exceeded any confusion or dismay. The slowly fading applause and cheers regained strength and momentum and grew in volume once more. And enough. It was Eugene who found it too much to bear. He dropped his stiff smile and lowered his arms from around his companions. Vermouth stepped aside as if he had been waiting for this cue. But Sienna did not step back. She stubbornly embraced Eugene's shoulder, and so did Christina and Anis from either side of Sienna. The three wanted to affirm their relationship in a photo that would surely be recounted for 1,000 years in front of everyone. Oh, come on, Eugene complained. Why are you complaining after you asked for this? Retorted Sienna. When did I ever ask for this? Eugene questioned. Do you perhaps feel ashamed of us? And he shot back. No, what nonsense are you talking about? Can't you see their expressions? Eugene countered. I only see Sir Eugene's face, Christina whispered, her cheeks blushing slightly. They were sweet words, but why did they send a chill down his spine? Eugene shivered and stepped sideways with a cough. Ahem. His call to stop had silenced the cheers and applause. But now, instead of the sounds, he was left with the burden of everyone's weighty stares. None of the general staff in the vicinity was unscathed. Yet they did not think of tending to their wounds and instead stared intently at Eugene and his companions. Many more people crowded around while also gazing earnestly in the direction from where the heroes emerged. They were undoubtedly filled with many questions. Was the Demon King of Destruction truly dead? Would it never appear again? Eugene could sense even more questions, but he shifted his gaze. All of the Lionhearts looked as though they might burst into tears at any moment. No, more than half were already shedding them. They swallowed the sobs that threatened to burst forth as they looked at Eugene and Vermouth. Hey, Eugene said, glancing sideways. He intended to encourage Vermouth to say something, but there was no need. Vermouth's expression spoke volumes more than words. His golden eyes shimmered with unshed tears and a gentle smile played on his lips. What must he be feeling? For Vermouth, the Lionheart family was something he created out of necessity. He had never enjoyed being called the hero or the great Vermouth. But the reason Vermouth had not lost himself within the dark heart of destruction wasn't just the talk he had with his companions. It was because they, his descendants, had all called out his name. I am Vermouth Lionheart, Vermouth spoke aloud after a bit. 300 years ago, after ending the war with the Oath and returning to the Kiel Empire, like his companions, the great Vermouth did not indulge in banquets or social gatherings. Despite a swift marriage and numerous concubines, there was never a scandal outside the family. He expanded his family, almost like an obsession, built the Black Lion Castle in the Uklas Mountains, and watched over the empire's borders as the Grand Duke of Kiel. There were hardly any stories passed down about the man known not as the Great Vermouth but as Vermouth Lionheart. He was a man suited to the word iron-blooded. That was how he was known to the world and to the Lionhearts. But there he was, Vermouth Lionheart, his voice trembling as he spoke his name in front of his distant descendants. "Thank you," Vermouth said, struggling to continue. He closed his eyes as tears streaked down his cheeks and sobbed, "For not forgetting me." How could they forget? Yet no one dared to ask. With dripping tears, Carmen placed her hand over her left chest atop the emblem that symbolized the Lionheart family. And all followed suit, placing their hands over their chests in respect to Vermouth. Should he do the same? Eugene pondered briefly before placing his hand on Vermouth's shoulder instead. "So, let's see." Eugene trailed off as he organized his thoughts. What should he say first? What he truly desired now was a clean wash, a locked door, and a long sleep in bed. But first, the story needed a conclusion. "As you can see, the Demon King of Destruction is dead," Eugene declared. A roar of inevitable cheers erupted. Eugene allowed the cheers to wash over him for several minutes. "The Demon King of Incarceration is also dead," he continued. "Where did the Demon King of Incarceration go?" Eugene prevented any questions by declaring, "By the time we stormed in, the Demon King of Incarceration had exhausted all his strength in holding the Demon King of Destruction. He was already dying. He thanked us before he died." The Demon King of Incarceration had reigned as the Greater Demon King and the Emperor of the Helmuth Empire for a long time. Even though he had surrendered his empire and pledged allegiance to the victors after losing in the war, the actual death of the Demon King of Incarceration left everyone speechless. "And here, some of you might have noticed," Eugene said hesitatingly. The enigmatic sixth member of the group had forced guesses about her identity. Eugene pointed at Anise, who was floating behind Christina. "This is Anise. Anise Slywood," he said. "The light sent me," answered Anise. In the now silent battlefield where cheers and applause had halted, Anise spread her wings wide for all to see. Conscious of the stunned expressions of Raphael and the priests, she continued, "I have been watching over the world for a long time. And only today have I come down to join you in a miracle. I was able to descend as an angel long after my death because your prayers were fervent and because of the faithful belief of Saint Christina Rogerus, who I consider a sister in spirit. It was also because, after 300 years, my friends wished for a miracle," she explained. Anise smiled benevolently as she spun her tale. She had no intention of ever letting the world know that she had been with Christina all along. Christina had always conducted herself with a fervent zeal, such as during the night march, and the scandals involving Eugene were well known. She wanted nothing to do with these memories. Thus, Anise maintained her smile without changing her expression and shifted all blame onto Christina. Indeed. The voice echoing in my head was Lady Anise's all along," Christina shouted. If she allowed Anise to continue, she would be left to take the sole blame like a scapegoat. But Christina was now a fully grown serpent. She had no intention of dying alone. "I have heard Lady Anise's voice so many times." Indeed it was true. "The reason I acted out of character was that I was enchanted by Lady Anise's voice," continued Christina. "Enchanted? I have never bestowed upon you any divine revelation to bewitch you," Anise retorted. "Lady Anise, do not put me to the test. Do not let my lips part unwittingly to utter your revelations," Christina said with a smile. "What are you trying to say?" Anise muttered. "Which bed Lady Anise has lain in, whose warmth she has sought." Christina stopped midway and raised her hands in prayer. Anise disappeared inside Christina's body while screaming. "This is the end," Eugene said, trying to take control of the speech once more. The murmuring was growing uncontrollably. Eugene felt the inevitable chaos and stepped back. "It's tough for everyone, but, he trailed off. He was hit with a sudden thought. It was natural for everyone who fought against destruction to feel weary. But surely the ones who had endured the most were the ones inside the Demon King of Destruction, the ones responsible for killing it. They were the ones most weary. Eugene glanced at the sky. The sun he had created earlier was still there, and beside it was Rhaenyra. She was unable to descend to the ground due to the crowd. Eugene exchanged glances with Sienna, and their thoughts aligned. Then he whispered to Rhaenyra, "Drop them." He was referring to the wizards and priests on her back. Rhaenyra's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly obeyed Eugene's command. With a scream of surprise, the wizards and priests fell, but not to the ground as spells of Draconic gently caught them. Simultaneously, Eugene unleashed his divine power. "Let the Emperor, the Pope, and other high-ranking officials take care of the aftermath," he ordered. The divine power flowing through the sun worked miracles of healing. Simultaneously, Sienna's magic transported Eugene and his companions onto Rhaenyra's back. "Wait just a moment. Eugene." Gilead reached out in shock, but Eugene ignored him. "Let's go," he declared. "Where are we going?" Rhaenyra asked. "Anywhere but here," Eugene answered. He thought they could slip back in about a month when things had settled, and sprawled himself out on Rhaenyra's back. Chapter 6:15. Vermouth Lionheart 7. "Ah!" Vermouth exclaimed. Indeed, the dragon was swift. The vast battlefield began to recede behind them in an instant. Vermouth glanced back. He could not entirely shake off the continuous shouts coming from behind. "Did you want to stay there longer?" Eugene asked sarcastically. "No, that's not it," Vermouth replied. Though he harbored many secrets and bore considerable anguish, Vermouth Lionheart was not one for social graces. He had let tears escape because he had been overwhelmed by surging emotions. But knowing how to handle what came next was a monumental challenge for him. Then suddenly he found himself abruptly hoisted onto the back of a dragon by Eugene and his comrades. A dragon, Vermouth thought with a grim expression. The realization that he was riding a dragon brought a strange feeling, considering that the Demon King of Destruction had nearly eradicated them all. Of course, Vermouth no longer considered himself an avatar of destruction and felt no guilt about the past. It had been the same even 300 years ago. But that was merely Vermouth's point of view. Wouldn't any surviving dragons have every reason to hold a grudge against him? Not just dragons either, he thought. Vermouth cleared his throat awkwardly as he turned his gaze towards a little girl who sat between Sienna and Eugene. The girl giggled merrily. "That girl is Sienna. She is a familiar you created, isn't she?" Vermouth asked. "My name is Mare," Mare answered immediately. She looked at Vermouth with sparkling eyes as if she had been waiting for this moment. "My first name is Mare, and for now my last name is Myrdian." "Mare Myrdian." "For now?" Vermouth asked, confused. "Soon it will be Mare Lionheart," Mare replied brightly. She laughed happily while pulling Eugene and Sienna's arms around her. Eugene closed his eyes without saying a word while Sienna blushed and dropped her head. "I see," Vermouth commented. Everyone was in the know about the feelings Sienna harbored for Hamel since 300 years ago. Vermouth smiled knowingly and nodded. "Is this dragon one that survived from 300 years ago?" Vermouth asked. "No," Eugene answered. It wasn't as if Vermouth was the keeper of all knowledge. Eugene opened his eyes and gently stroked Rhaenyra's scales. "Do you remember Rhysakia?" he asked. "How could I forget?" Vermouth responded. "The demonic dragon Rhysakia. Even after Helmuth became an empire, Rhysakia shunned humans and named himself the Black Dragon Duke upon receiving the title of Duke. He was a dragon that reached the pinnacle of misanthropy." Vermouth had pondered in the past whether he should kill Rhysakia for the sake of the future. "She is Rhysakia's daughter," Eugene said. "Oh, great Vermouth, this lady is called Rhaenyra." The fact that the legendary Vermouth from the fairy tale took an interest in her elicited a bright voice from Rhaenyra. Vermouth's cheeks twitched after hearing their answers. He was grappling with several doubts. Vermouth was well aware of what the demons called him, Vermouth of Despair. He wondered why Rhysakia's daughter showed him such reverence when he had been a figure of fear among the demon folk and earned himself such an ominous nickname. And then, "Isn't Rhysakia dead?" Vermouth asked tentatively. "I killed him," Eugene answered with a calm expression. "Even thinking about it now, the Black Dragon Duke deserved to die," Rhaenyra also responded nonchalantly. She never had any familial affection for Rhysakia to speak of, and she knew what schemes the Black Dragon Duke had harbored. I see. Vermouth reluctantly nodded. He could somewhat understand. If the dragon could allow her father's killer to ride her, why couldn't she accept the one responsible for nearly wiping out her race? Hamel, they're still calling us, commented Vermouth. Your hearing is sharp. You can still hear them from this distance. Eugene asked, surprised. There are also some people following us from behind, Vermouth said while pointing behind them. Indeed, Vermouth's words were true. Several figures were pursuing them from afar, with Melkith in the lead. Eugene gestured towards Sienna with a face full of disgust. Drop them, he ordered. Okay, Sienna answered. Knowing that Melkith was leading the pursuers made it easier for Sienna to cast aside any hesitation. The beam of light she fired exploded upon making contact with Melkith. Kaya! With a long scream, Melkith plummeted downward. Is this really okay? Vermouth stuttered. Everything that was happening was hard to grasp with common sense. It is, came the answer. Vermouth was restrained by common sense only because he did not know what kind of person Melkith El-Haya was. Eugene clicked his tongue in disgust and slapped Vermouth's back hard. I just saved you, got it? He said. Why are you saying that all of a sudden? Vermouth asked, perplexed. Not from the Demon King of Destruction, but from losing human dignity. And from shame. That's what I saved you from, Eugene explained. There was a time in the past when he had a conversation with Melkith and asked her a question. Which of the heroes from 300 years ago did she respect the most? Naturally, any wizard would say the wise Sienna, but Melkith had been an exception. Melkith had replied that her most respected hero was the great Vermouth. The reason being that Vermouth had made a pact with the wind spirit king Tempest. The world spoke of the great Vermouth as a warrior and a knight, but Melkith thought otherwise. The great Vermouth was a grand spirit wizard, having forged a contract with the wind spirit king. In fact, Melkith's obsession with Tempest stemmed from Vermouth. So what would happen when she actually met Vermouth, whom she had admired since childhood? Eugene couldn't even begin to imagine the frenzy that Melkith would create. Everything should take care of itself if we stay away for about a month, Eugene said firmly. He smiled contentedly after confirming that there were no more pursuers on their tail. Take care of itself? Vermouth asked, still stunned. Do you think a war just ends with a victory? There's a lot that happens afterward, said Eugene. That's obvious, muttered Vermouth. What's obvious? I hate dealing with that stuff. I'm good at fighting and killing demon kings, not cleanup or politics. I hate that, said Eugene. While we were fighting on the ground, the Pope and the Emperor stayed within their territories. It's their duty to handle the aftermath. Anise agreed and supported Eugene's words with a nod. Molen, Sienna, and Christina did not say anything, but the relief on their faces showed they were glad to have escaped. Vermouth looked around at his companions' faces and let out a hollow laugh. 300 years ago, we had many discussions about a grand procession, said Vermouth. It's been ages since then. You had your procession after I died, didn't you? Eugene accused. Well, some idiot chose to die alone, so it wasn't any joyous procession, Sienna grumbled as if for Eugene to hear, but he, as usual, pretended not to hear. And Vermouth, while you were gone, I've already experienced a few similar things. I'm so sick of it, Eugene complained. He had been forced into embarrassingly grand marches after he killed the new Demon King of Fury and after he liberated Horia. Eugene shuddered at the thought of the platinum lion tucked away in the corner of the Lionheart mansion. Why do you ask? Do you want to have a procession since it'll be the first with all of us together? Eugene asked. The war with the Demon King was truly over. As they had always hoped, everyone had returned together. This thought made Eugene feel slightly regretful about the absence of a march, but no, he thought to himself firmly. He quickly shook off the regret. The upcoming procession would undoubtedly be the most magnificent in history, and definitely with the Platinum Lion at the forefront of the march. Eugene absolutely did not want to be waving his hand with a forced smile atop a damned float. I don't want to either, Vermouth said with a bitter smile. He had attended endless events 300 years ago, disregarding his feelings for such events as they were necessary. But truthfully, even he despised such events. What will we do about that? Christina asked while looking down. The Demon King of Incarceration had moved the capital of Helmuth, Pandemonium. It lay in ruins on the surface. Just bulldoze it over, Eugene said without a second thought. The forest of buildings in Pandemonium had been the symbol of Helmuth, but it was now gone. Since the demon king of incarceration had killed all the demons who had participated in the war, what lay below was nothing more than a spooky ghost town without survivors. What about Helmuth? Christina asked. Is dividing the territory a bit too much? Eugene wondered. It's not just a city. It's an empire. Where it's located is a bit awkward as well. Molen stroked his beard thoughtfully as he answered. After all, he had not become a king just because of his sheer size. If we bring it to the table, the kings of the continent will be tripping over themselves to get a slice. Though our presence ensures it won't escalate into war, someone is bound to get angry, said Molen. The Emperor of Kiel is quite greedy. Eugene felt subtle glances directed his way. He immediately straightened up and shook his head. Don't even start talking to me about playing king, he said. I didn't say anything, responded Anise. Your expression says it all. I'm absolutely not doing it. If you really need someone, there are still demons left in Helmuth. Pick one of them, suggested Eugene. Do you know any demons? Fiona challenged. Would I? It's a shame Balzac is dead. If he were alive, I would have made him king of Helmuth, muttered Eugene. I made a promise with Balzac, Sienna spoke up with a serious expression. What promise? Eugene asked curiously. To write him a fairy tale, Sienna answered. What, to name him the legendary Balzac? Eugene asked sarcastically. How did you know? Sienna asked with a startled expression. Surely he wasn't serious about leaving behind the name the legendary Balzac? Well, it was still better than the stupid Hamel. Eugene muttered with a wry expression. Well, it's a cool name. Can't argue with him since he's dead. Better than the cunning Balzac, isn't it? Sienna said. Just go with the legendary Balzac. Anyway, I have no interest in ruling Helmuth. Anyone here interested? Eugene asked. No one raised their hand. Eugene glanced at Vermouth just in case. Since Vermouth's body was originally that of the demon king of incarceration, it seemed like a reasonable idea that he might rule Helmuth. I don't want it either, Vermouth said. Then let's not worry about it. They'll figure it out themselves, Eugene said with a shrug. With Eugene holding the chains that controlled the demons, there was no need to worry about a rebellion. Still, it's a bit regrettable about Babel, Eugene commented. Babel? Why? Sienna asked, confused. I made a promise to Lady Ancilla. I was going to give her Babel as a gift, Eugene answered. The Lionheart family home had been turned into a mess by the elves and dwarves. But since it couldn't be helped, he had made a promise to Ancilla to find her a suitable place. But now that Babel had collapsed completely, he couldn't even offer that even if he wanted to. We'll just have to build a new one, Eugene said firmly. Got a spot picked out? Sienna asked. Somewhere with a forest and a river flowing, Eugene started to answer with a stern face. Sienna's fist jabbed into his side. So where are we headed? Christina spoke up while sneakily pulling out a bottle of liquor from inside her robe. The mere appearance of the bottle drew everyone closer. Let's go somewhere secluded and rest for a bit. Bring out the liquor first. Hamel, I know you stashed a bottle in your cloak before you stepped onto the battlefield, said Anise. Wait a moment. Vermouth, who had been listening to the conversation joyfully, suddenly spoke up. You had it prepared in advance. So, Eugene shot back. Is there a problem? Christina asked, confused. You mean to tell me, before fighting the demon king of destruction, you had already stashed away a bottle? Vermouth asked. Bastard, have you forgotten everything from being sealed away for hundreds of years? Eugene clicked his tongue disapprovingly. Didn't we always do that in the old days? We always brought liquor before fighting a demon king. Drink before dying or after killing. That's true, but... Vermouth's eyes wavered. Indeed, that was how it used to be. But to have liquor ready just before the final battle that could determine the fate of the world and their comrades. So, you're not going to drink it? Eugene asked. If you give it, I'll drink, Vermouth said with a smile. Yeah, but not now. If we're going to drink, we'll do it later. We'll just share one bottle for now, said Eugene. The last drinking session had taught Eugene a lot. Drinking now in their less-than-ideal state could repeat history once more. So, after we rest, where do we go? Vermouth inquired. Unable to resist liquor, Anise was the first to open the bottle. She took one sip then another. Why are you drinking twice when there's not much? Eugene sounded annoyed. This is the liquor Christina brought out. And I didn't drink twice. Once for me, once for Christina. Understand? Anise said with a giggle. Sharing one body had its moments. I'm going to head to the World Tree, Sienna said. She passed the bottle she had sipped from to the side. I've said my farewell, but you should still report back. Then there's Roguyaran, and the distant seas to visit, said Eugene. He smiled faintly when he recalled Vischer in deep slumber. It almost felt like he could hear the laughter of light from afar. We need to check on Lehanjar. My descendants are there, aren't they? Molan said. Eugene passed the bottle to Molan. After taking a swig, he handed it to Vermouth. If possible, I'd like to check on Revesta too. There might be nothing left there now. But still, I want to see it with my own eyes, Vermouth answered with a bitter smile. Revesta was where Vermouth had been sealed for over 200 years. The demons that had made a pact with the Demon King of Destruction and lived there had perished, and the sealed beasts had died in the War of Horia. Now Revesta was just a small detached island in the sea. Vermouth knew it as well, but he wanted to see it for himself. And after that? Vermouth, isn't there anything else you want to do? Hamel said he wanted to establish an academy. Better than a tavern. Do you have a problem with my dream? I think it's a wonderful dream. Amidst the ongoing banter, Vermouth let out a soft laugh. What I want to do? I'll think about it slowly, he murmured. He had already achieved what he truly wanted. There was no rush for the next. No fate bound Vermouth any longer, nor did the world. The destruction had ended. Chapter 616. Ever After 1. Sightings of the heroes who had disappeared immediately following their defeat of the Demon King of Destruction were spread all across the continent. Their very first destination had been the Lehanjar mountain range. They suddenly descended from the sky to land right in front of us, Amun-Ra said with a smile as he recalled that moment. His already fierce visage had had a few more scars added to it. Those scars had been earned while defending against the march of the Nur. Amun considered these scars as glorious medals commemorating their victory, so he refused to have them healed and wore them with pride. To be honest, at that time I was extremely exhausted. And it wasn't just me, we were all at our limits. After all, until just a few hours ago, we had been facing an endless tide of monsters. Though indeed it's not like we were the only ones, Amun admitted with a chuckle before falling silent for a few moments and shaking his head. When the news finally reached us by magic, we were informed that the Demon King of Destruction had been slain. As such, we were on our way back to base. We also heard about how the great Vermouth had returned from the dead, and of how the heroes had suddenly left the battlefield. Well, even though we had heard about it in advance, when the great hero suddenly landed in front of us, we couldn't help but be amazed and thrilled to see him in person. The place where Amun had set up his defense was at the very northernmost tip of the continent. It was far from the front lines of the battle against the Demon King of Destruction. Of course, if one could ride a dragon for transport and had all kinds of magic for support, it would be easy to cross such a distance in only a few hours. My ancestor, for whom I am proud to declare my eternal respect, threw his arm over my shoulders and told me I had done a good job. He also said that everything was finally over, Amun said with a proud smile. At that time, Amun hadn't been able to endure the sudden surge of overwhelming emotions and had fallen to his knees as his legs grew weak. It wasn't just me, Amun defended himself. Lord Ortis, who had shared command over the vanguard alongside me, was also shedding thick streams of tears. Ivik refused to allow himself to fall to his knees or shed tears, but everyone there knew the reason why he kept stubbornly staring up into the sky. In any case, while we were still overcome by our emotions, the great Vermouth had something he wanted to say to us. He had sincerely thanked them. The great Vermouth, he actually bowed his head to all of us. Icham. What happened after that? Amun blinked as he looked at the crowd in front of him in surprise. Those currently gathered around him were the various heads of the continent's union of news guilds. Now that the war had ended, the news guilds had quickly burst into action, trying to weave together the whole story of the war. Although, on the surface, it was just the union of news guilds that was taking action, all of the guilds had the consent and were working in cooperation with the various nations of the continent. Unlike 300 years ago, when only Sienna's fairy tale had been left as an ambiguous historical record of that era, The Union had sworn to work together and create a clear record of everything that had happened in this war and thus preserve it as a historical record for future generations. For the sake of this mission, Amon, the king of Ruhr, was willing to personally meet with the heads of the Union and talk about his own experiences. In fact, even without knowing about the oaths sworn by the Union's leaders, Amon would have still gladly accepted their interview. The heroes he so respected had recognized his efforts, and Amon was eager to boast about it. Well, you want to know what happened next, do you? But there wasn't really anything that came after that. After praising us, they flew back up into the sky. They crossed over the peak of the Lehanjar range and seemed to have headed into the Ruguyarn. They didn't say anything about where they were going either, Amon confessed before awkwardly clearing his throat. Ahem, more importantly, allow me to regale you with tales of just how courageously and desperately I and the rest of our army held the line against the Nur. Even though the forces under Amon's command hadn't been able to swing their axes into the Demon King of Destruction, they had also played their part in the battle to decide the fate of the world. It was all because of the duty they had been entrusted with. Someone had to stand guard here at the Lehanjar. However, since they hadn't been able to fight against the Demon King of Destruction directly, their efforts wouldn't receive as much coverage in the stories that would be passed down to later generations. So Amon felt that he had no choice but to expound on their achievements to his current audience. The gathered heads of the news guilds were only interested in finding the heroes' whereabouts and weren't really willing to take the time to listen to Amon's tale. But in the face of Amon's scar-covered visage, none of them could muster up the courage to say, "No thank you." Over in the capital city of Shimuan in the southern seas. "Yes, it's true," said Scalia Animus. Scalia had once been a member of the Violent Tide Knights, Shimuan's representative knightly order, and had been known by her nicknames as the Flower of the Knightly Order and the Princess Knight. But that was a story from years ago. She had already laid down her sword and divested herself from her former knighthood. That said, she hadn't just returned to being a mere princess either. Instead, Princess Scalia had turned to faith. And not just any faith but the faith of Eugene Lionheart. Technically speaking, it was in Shimuan that Eugene Lionheart had first declared himself a god, and a statue had been erected in the city's main plaza of his return from slaying the second Demon King of Fury. Princess Scalia was so devout that she prayed in front of his sculpted icon every week. No, every single day, and the royal family was hoping that Scalia might someday be officially recognized as his actual saint. On that day I was praying in front of his icon as I always do. Of course, I wasn't the only one present. With me, there were also the family members of the knights and soldiers who had yet to return from the battlefield, along with the other members of the faithful who worship Sir Eugene, Scalia said, her smile even more beautiful than when she had gone around while receiving accolades as the Princess Knight. She folded her hands together in prayer as she continued speaking with a sigh of admiration. At that moment, a light descended from the sky. Our Lord had arrived in response to all of our prayers. The members of the news guilds who were currently interviewing Scalia knew that the truth was different from what Scalia claimed. They had already heard the stories from the other believers who had been gathered there. Eugene Lionheart had descended from the heavens with a blatant look of embarrassment on his face, and his other comrades had been laughing in amusement as they alternated between looking at Eugene's face and the face of the sculpture. If the news guilds were forced to speculate based on the information that they had gathered about the various heroes' personalities, the group had simply descended from the sky to take a moment to tease Eugene Lionheart about his sculpture as they were passing by. Our Lord spoke to us. He told us that he would return after making a trip into the distant sea. His reason for doing so? Scalia shook her head. How could I dare to ask for the reason behind our divine Lord's choice of action? Did that mean she hadn't asked him where he might be heading next? In the face of this carefully posed question, Scalia's expression grew stern as she scolded them. Our Lord is everywhere and nowhere. Even as I say this to you, he is surely here with us. Such beliefs are a core part of our faith. In other words, she didn't know. The next piece of news about the heroes' sightseeing trips sprung up a week later. Within the Zoran tribe of the Samar rainforest. I wasn't able to hear the exact details, but it seemed like they had already spent a few days in the rainforest before they came to visit me. They must have been visiting the World Tree, the one in the Elven domain, Ivatar quickly specified. The Zoran tribe, who had united all of the tribes within the rainforest, already held enough territory that they could rightfully be called an empire. However, the young great chieftain Ivatar Zahav hadn't raised himself as their emperor and still insisted on sticking with the title of Great Chieftain. This was because of the negative sentiments that the tribes of the rainforest still harbored towards the words empire and emperor. I may have granted you this private meeting due to your oaths with the kings of the continent, but, let me first make this clear. If you ask me for the location of the world tree, I will chop off your arms. And if you release your rats into our forest without my permission to find the location of the world tree in the Elven territory, I'll just have to show you how we barbarians, about whom you so like to gossip, enforce our rules. Ivatar warned them, the tattoos on his face writhing as his lips curved into a menacing smile. It had already been confirmed during the war that the military forces under Ivatar's command could stand on their own when compared to any of the forces belonging to the overlords of the continent. So the News Guild heads who had arrived at the rainforest with a plan of thoroughly investigating all its mysteries, decided right then and there to go back the way they had come. But please don't worry too much. Since a promise is a promise, I will reveal everything that we talked about during our meeting. I've already asked and received permission to do so from my friend Eugene. Ivatar made sure to emphasize the word friend before continuing his narration. They said that they came here to greet the world tree. I didn't ask about the full details, but they said that the world tree provided them with great help during their defeat of the demon king of destruction. The world tree was the religious figure that all elves and the natives who lived in the rainforest worshipped. Seeing as how the heroes had said that they had received its help, it seems that the faith of the world tree wasn't just a simple folk religion. Apart from that, they also passed on a message from the world tree. Though, well, the message didn't really contain anything special. It just charged me with the duty of cherishing and protecting the forest. But well, we already do that every day, Ivatar declared with a proud laugh. Every single day. The heads of the news guilds recalled the sights they had seen before arriving at this meeting. The figures of those fierce-looking warriors as they went around transplanting seedlings and spraying fertilizer. But what you're still curious about is where Eugene and the other heroes went next, right? I did happen to hear where they were planning on going. I am his friend after all, Ivatar said as he emphasized the word friend once more. They said that they were going to Revesta. Following the end of the war, these reporters had met countless people and listened to all of their stories, but this was their first time hearing about the heroes' next destination. The leaders of the various news guilds unconsciously leaped right out of their seats. Ivatar burst out laughing. I understand why that news might light a fire under you. However, do you really think that you will be able to meet them if you head there now? It turned out just as Ivatar had said. The leaders of the news guilds immediately left Zoran territory in a hurry. Going through a chain of warp gates, they traveled across the whole continent to arrive at Helmuth. There, they were met with many problems. Following the death of the demon king of incarceration, Helmuth had been placed under the collective control of all the nations on the continent. Yet even so, Helmuth still needed to find a representative who could speak as the country's new leader. The demon folk who had refused to participate in the war were all candidates for that position, so Helmuth was trying to decide which of them should take on that role through the unfamiliar process of holding an election. In such a situation, it was only natural for there to be great confusion. Much of that confusion came from the human immigrants, who were faced with the suspension of the overwhelming levels of welfare that they had previously enjoyed, and the closure of most of the shops within Helmuth. Elite knights dispatched from every country on the continent were stationed on every street, standing ready to prevent any riots. Demon folk held up signs, calling for people to give their precious votes to the candidates that they were supporting, and meanwhile the human immigrants were holding a protest on the main street. We aren't demon folk. Respect the rights of the human immigrants. We just want to go home. All of this was already confusing enough, but what especially gave the heads of the various news guilds a headache was the fact that Revesta happened to be located in the very hinterlands of Helmuth. This meant that there weren't any warp gates that could take them directly to their destination. Even after going through the closest warp gate to Revesta, they would still have to travel a few days by foot, and then a few more days by boat before they could finally arrive at Revesta. But with their goals seemingly right in front of their very noses, the hardworking heads couldn't help but continue with their mission. They went through that final warp gate, raced past all the various towns and villages on the way at breakneck speed, and finally arrived at the ocean. Only to hear some disappointing news as they were trying to find a ship that would carry them across the water. Revesta? That island disappeared a few days ago. Fortunately, they could hear the true story of what had happened from a most unexpected place. Within the Holy Empire of Ura's prison of heresy. This was the place where Uras imprisoned any priests or paladins who had fallen into corruption, as well as members of any religious cults not recognized by the church. To think that the Union of News Guilds would find its way here. It seems that your name isn't just for show. Your eyes and ears must truly be quite sharp. The person who met with the heads of the news guilds wasn't the chief warden of the prison. It was the commander of the Blood Cross Knights, the Crusader Rafael Martinez. With a cold smile that didn't suit his youthful appearance, he led the leaders deeper into the prison. I hope you don't misunderstand why we are holding the witness here, as we never intended to conceal her presence in the first place. It is merely because she happens to be a sinner who has betrayed the faith before. Because of a deal that she had made with Lady Sienna in the past, we allowed her to go free instead of killing or capturing her. But she happens to be the only witness to what happened that day. So after recapturing her, we only transferred her here to keep her from escaping before we had a chance to listen to her account of the events, Raphael explained. In their hearts, the heads wanted to protest. Wasn't any information discovered about Eugene Lionheart and the other heroes supposed to be immediately shared with all of the nations of the continent through the news guilds? However, the heads of the news guilds couldn't actually muster up any of those protests. The Crusader was known to be second to none when it came to the depths of his fanaticism, and this was Ura's prison of heresy. Even if the Crusader were to chop off all of their heads right here and now, not a single word would ever leak to the public about it. Raphael continued, the woman we have in our custody is Himoria. You're all familiar with that name, aren't you? They did recognize that name. It was the name of the previous ace of Ura's Malficarum Inquisition, the woman who had once been known as the Guillotine. However, that former inquisitor was said to have fallen and had become Amelia Merwin's servant, only for her to completely disappear following the liberation of Horia. I allowed her to go free. However, I also branded her with a mark that would allow me to find her no matter where she went or what she did. I told her to hide away somewhere like a dying rat, breathing its last breaths. But it seems that impudent woman still harbored some malicious intent, Raphael said with a sneer. That's not true. A loud shout emerged from the iron bars of an occupied prison cell. Himoria, who had been crouching inside her cell, shook the bars while screaming, What do you mean malicious intent? I never showed anything like that. Shut up, you evil creature. If it weren't for Lady Sienna's orders, I would have never let you go free, Raphael spat out as his eyes narrowed in a glare. Himoria, who was grinding her teeth furiously, banged her head against the iron bars as she growled, I was falsely accused. What do you mean by falsely accused? Don't you know full well just what kind of place Revesta was? It was where the Demon King of Destruction was being kept asleep, Raphael said as he loudly kicked the bars of her cell. Bang! Struck by the shockwaves from his kick, Himoria let out a scream as she was sent rolling across the ground. You also spent some time hiding in Revesta along with Amelia Merwin. So, were you preparing to perform some kind of evil ritual there in anticipation of the Demon King of Destruction's resurrection? Or perhaps you coveted the traces of dark power he might have left there. Maybe you were even planning on inviting the radicals who are enraged by Helmuth's current situation over to Revesta to start a rebellion. Raphael laid out his guesses. You're being delusional. Himoria shouted. Hasn't this shitty brand of yours already told you where I was and what I was doing? I only went to Revesta after the war had ended. Before that I was just... It was hard for Himoria to keep speaking. She didn't want to admit to having lived the life of a vagrant who was forced to wander the back alleys of Helmuth. The only good thing she had going for her was that she wasn't a complete vampire, so she wasn't forced to feed solely on blood. However, she was occasionally overcome by the urge to suck someone's blood. Since she wasn't allowed to drink human blood, Himoria had survived by sucking the blood of other vagrant demon folk, who were in no better shape than the rats who lived in the gutter beside them. While fearing that the hunters of Uras would eventually come looking for her, no matter where she went, Himoria had lived in hiding like this ever since she had left Horia. Then the war began and soon afterward it abruptly ended. While still in hiding, she had harbored some hopes that the Demon King of Incarceration or the Demon King of Destruction might win the war. But that didn't happen. Helmuth was defeated. Even as Helmuth fell into chaos, Himoria's living space was gradually reduced. This was because of the knights sent to Helmuth from the countries on the continent. Among their numbers were a few paladins and battle priests of Eurus. If she were forced to compete with these knights solely in terms of strength, most of them were weaker than Himoria, but the problem was the brand on her shoulder. If she were caught committing a crime, a hunting party would definitely be sent after her. And since the paladins could also sense the presence of her brand, the darkness of Helmuth's back alleys could no longer offer Himoria a safe place to rest. The only safe place that had popped up in her mind at that moment was Revesta. The demon king of destruction who had owned the island was dead. There weren't any demon folk left living there either. The place was truly a barren wasteland with nothing going for it and no reason for anyone to visit it. But didn't that make it the perfect place for her to hide out? So Himoria had crossed the sea and arrived in Revesta. When she finally reached the shore after an exhausting swim, Himoria was drained and felt pushed to her very limits. She decided to just live in Revesta for the rest of her life. Although the land was barren, she could still try to cultivate a field. She could farm, plant trees, grow fruit, and catch fish. Eventually, she might even be able to raise some kind of livestock, right? Himoria was still worried about being overwhelmed by her urge to suck someone's blood, but she remembered the old days when she was still living as an inquisitor. She had gone without touching a single drop of blood. So as long as she could endure and hold on to her restraint, she should be able to completely overcome the urge in time. Here in Revesta she could be reborn. She could live a whole new life. I was falsely accused, Himoria sobbed as she clawed at the floor. That was truly all she had been hoping for when she crossed over to Revesta. Once there, she found that the ground in Revesta no longer showed any traces of dark power. So it seemed that if she just tilled some fields and sowed seeds in them, they might truly bear fruit in time. Himoria dove into work, tilling the wasteland and fishing the sea. But after about a week had passed like this, devils descended on Himoria from the sky. Or at least to Himoria, those people had felt no different from devils. Immediately recognizing who they were, Himoria let out a scream and tried to run away, only to be captured by one of those devils. "What the fuck are you doing here?" Eugene Lionheart, her sworn enemy who had ruined Himoria's life, had asked her this question with a puzzled expression. Himoria was so scared that her teeth were chattering. And when she was unable to answer, he smacked her on the back of her head. "Are you still insisting on doing that bullshit of grinding your teeth at me?" That was yet another false accusation. She wasn't grinding her teeth, she was just so terrified that her teeth were chattering on their own. "There's no point in listening to her ramblings any further," Raphael said as he looked back at the various leaders with a bored expression. Sir Eugene and the other heroes arrived on that island to check the situation in Revesta. They must have been worried that traces of the demon king of destruction still remained. It turned out that there wasn't anything to be worried about, but they then decided there was no need for a place like Revesta to remain, so they sank the entire island. And so, the comfortable hideaway Himoria had been dreaming of was laid to rest at the bottom of the sea. Sir Eugene threw this bitch down onto the shore and left her there. But of course we were already aware that she had gone to Revesta. We were just leaving her alone for a while because we were curious about what she was planning to do next. But since someone had suddenly returned her to the shore of the mainland, and she was just lying there, what else were we supposed to do? Raphael said with a shrug. They captured her and locked her away here in the prison of heresy. However, we intended to let her out in a few days. We don't intend to kill her. And it would be a far greater punishment for her to continue living a life in the outside world without any safety than it would be to keep her locked up in here. But the thing you're really curious about doesn't have anything to do with her situation now, does it? Rahael said with a smirk as he stared back at the News Guild people. Have any of you heard this piece of news before? Before the liberation of Horia, a dragon came by to see Sir Eugene. It was the red dragon Ariartel. Instead of directly participating in that battle, the dragon had opened up her treasure vault and bestowed various precious weapons onto the warriors gathered there, while also giving some advice to the human wizards. The story of how a dragon came looking for Eugene Lionheart in person and lent him her assistance would surely become one of his many legends that would be passed down to future generations. According to what this thing claims, an unknown woman with red hair was accompanying Sir Eugene to Revesta, Raphael said as he indicated towards Himoria with a tilt of his chin. I don't know where Sir Eugene was heading next after he was done sinking the island of Revesta, but he might have gone with that mysterious woman to the dragon's lair. Of course I don't know where the dragon's lair is either. As the heads of the news guilds were left silently stewing in their frustration, Raphael's murmurs continued. If you want to speak with the heroes, you'll either have to search for the dragon's lair or wait for them in front of the Lionheart estate. Haha, the latter option might actually be the more difficult challenge. You must have heard the latest news, haven't you? It's said that when the Keel Emperor tried to visit the Lionhearts, the Patriarch and his wife stood their ground and prevented him from entering. Following the end of the war, a procession of worshippers seeking to meet with the great Vermouth and Eugene Lionheart had arrived at the Lionheart estate, but they had all been blocked and turned away by the lady of the house, Ancilla. Even the emperor who had visited to pay his respects was no exception to this. Especially since the main branch of the Lionheart clan is currently busy preparing to move out of the estate. You should just try your best to find where the dragon's lair is hidden, Raphael advised with a chuckle. Through the sound of Raphael's laughter, Himoria weeping as she ground her teeth could still be heard in the background. As in, happily ever after. Open Bookworm and Danthman's thoughts. VW, I guess she deserved it, but still, poor Himoria. Momo, for the first time I really felt sorry for Himoria. All she wanted was to be a recluse,